Hello and welcome to Reflections on the Blue Moon in Pisces. Mina Makhosi Nomabutho. I am a indigenous South African healer, isangoma, inyanga, umthandazeli, umelaphi wendabuko, initiated in the rites of my ancestors. And this is Sangoma Society, where we demystify the astral and the ancestral. Today I'd like to reflect on the super full blue moon in Pisces. I would have done this reading sooner had I not relented and accepted that perhaps once in a blue moon I would find myself doing things differently. So, if you remember a few weeks ago, we shared a YouTube video about sitting with the feelings. And I think it's apt that on this year's blue moon, we do a reflection rather than a projection. A little under a month ago, I was told not to do one of my favorite things, which is ukuphalaza, to purge. It's a cleansing modality that we encourage greatly for its ability to assist with the processing of emotions and also the way in which it works with plant medicine to remove entities and all sorts of things from the body. And there was a moment in which I was going through a realization, an emotional realization, and I just wanted to purge because I knew that the sooner I purge, the sooner I clear up what's sitting in my heart chakra and open myself up to feeling new things again. But ancestral guidance came through at that point to just sit with it. Not to purge. Do the work, but just sit in your body and feel what you are feeling. Oh my goodness. What a revelation. And I think the blue moon in Pisces was that for a lot of people. A moon in which the realizations came to the surface so viscerally that they could not be ignored. Often we do our moon readings to give insights to what you can anticipate rising to the surface. With the blue moon in Pisces, the realizations washed themselves from the depths of the ocean right onto the shore and laid themselves bare at our feet. And it was brutal. The full moon in Pisces was a deep dive into what influences our behavior from our subconscious. A gift of realizations, because with each full moon, we're given the opportunity to do the shadow work, which is to look back and understand what it is in us that has passed, in our actions, in past events, that influences our shadow selves, that influences the ways in which we show up that are detrimental to how we want to show up. And with the full moon in Pisces, that happened so viscerally, so plainly, that what remains is to work through the understanding of the purpose of these realizations. Our realizations hold keys to the places where we might feel that there are things that are beyond our power. We often surrender our power to the patterns that we see playing out in our lives. But when we are given the gift of seeing our role or the role of our past traumas in how we show up in our lives, we're shown where it is that we can turn our attention to in order to heal. And when we heal in those parts of our lives, we can then change how we show up in those parts of our lives. And that's where the magic happens. It's not magic in the sense that it happens by itself. It's magical in the sense that we realize our own power and our own agency. But the experience of the realization itself can be so painful because of the events that led to that pattern of behavior. And we're often so reluctant to look at what hurt us, what scarred us into a pattern of behavior that has turned our lives or our way of being in the world into something that feels beyond our power. And when we want to forget these realizations, what we do is we rob ourselves of the opportunity of reclaiming our power. At the time when the full moon happened, Mercury had just gone retrograde and Venus had yet to station direct. So the realizations that came to the surface were so much about how we communicate our needs for love in the world, our need for community, our need for companionship, and where that dysfunction in the ways that we show up in those areas of our lives stems from. And because the nature of how we relate to other people in the world often stems from how we were nurtured in our infancy and our childhood, when it's time to come to terms with those realizations, what makes this season so brutal is that it can feel like looking at what has come to the surface is an act of betrayal of those whom we loved first in this world. Those who nurtured us, those who were our first community. And when we deny ourselves that opportunity to look at what those events shaped in us, we deny ourselves our agency in deciding how we show up now. Throughout the Venus retrograde, we discouraged leaning into the knee-jerk reaction of a quick breakup or cutting anyone off in the event that it might lead to reconciliation that you would feel like you hadn't fully thought through. We were encouraging a stance of observation and taking note in the hope that in the process of observing your relationship, romantic and otherwise, that you would begin to recognize the patterns beneath the relationships that you conduct, so that you have a better understanding of yourself within your relationships. Since we're still in the post-retrograde shadow with Venus in Leo, and now Mercury has stationed retrograde in Virgo, and Jupiter has also stationed retrograde, it's a good time to reflect on what you've observed so far, especially about relationships. It may not be the best time to speak on these things, as Mercury retrograde can make mutual understanding into a sticking point, but it is good to reflect. Now, if you're a person who knows and understands conflict resolution, and you know that your observations have been thoroughly interrogated, and you trust yourself to be able to communicate with those people with whom you relate, you can go there, but it's not going to be an easy conversation. It's not going to be a short conversation. That is why we say wait until the Mercury retrograde post-shadow period has dissipated enough that there is greater possibility for mutual understanding. This Jupiter retrograde gives us an opportunity to go deeper into our reconsiderations about what we don't want to carry forward with us. It's easy for us to look outwardly at people and situations and say that those people and relationships are the things that we want to end. What is more difficult, though, is to observe our own participation in how we find ourselves where we are. In keeping with the lens of realization that was cleared by the blue moon, some of these realizations around our relationships hold the key to ending patterns that we continue to play out. The thing is that we often think that what we choose in terms of relationships is based on the principles we put down on paper. But the truth is that we gravitate to what is familiar to us. Our understanding of love in the world is not necessarily what we intellectually understand love to be, but it is what we gravitate towards in the sense of what duplicates those earliest connections that we developed as human beings. That is what we tend to understand on a subconscious level as a more authentic representation of love. We're going towards what we know on a subconscious level, not what we want on a conscious level. That's why we always bring it back to the shadow work, so that we can demystify and understand what is driving us on the subconscious level in order to enable us to act in the way that we want to act on a conscious level, to clarify these things for us. Because it's very easy for us to start to think that we're cursed in certain ways, especially in the realm of love. We always think that this is something mystical and about luck. And as a Sangoma, I have seen so many people running from confronting the reality that is revealed by the patterns that they play out and moments such as the one that we find ourselves in. But more often than not, we can see the surface level of the pattern, but we actively try to suppress the realizations that come with moments like the one that we're in now, following this full moon. The instinct is to say, oh, that was emotionally awful, and just try to find ourselves back at a place before we had these realizations, before our world was shattered by the perspective that came with the moon. So often, we refuse to interrogate the source of a pattern because it points at dynamics we want to ignore between ourselves and the ones we knew first in this world, our parents and our siblings, our family. It feels disloyal to even begin to acknowledge the patterns that we're seeing in our lives. For instance, it can be easy to create stories about how people can't be trusted because we're telling a story from a pattern of betrayal. We can get into a narrative about being cursed with betrayal as a theme in our lives. But if we slow down and look at the patterns in the relationship in which we were betrayed, we find answers. When we give ourselves an opportunity to reflect and really look at the relationships in which certain patterns duplicated themselves, say in the theme of betrayal, then we can look at where else in our lives that those same patterns play out in a similar way. Perhaps there's a theme of how certain things were said, and in retrospect, you can see that those were the clues to the betrayal that would come. And then you piece together perhaps how those comments mirror a type of comment you grew up hearing. But when you look at the people who betrayed you, you might say, oh, these belittling comments that I chose to minimize came back to bite me as betrayal. But that person was always showing their jealousy in that way. So the betrayal was just an opportunity for them that they couldn't pass up. But sometimes spotting the pattern in these external events is the easy part. The part where the running and avoidance begins is when we start to see aspects of those external events and relationships mirror dynamics within our closest familial relationships. And when our mind has made that correlation, but we're not yet ready to confront that truth, we run. We experience the emotional anguish. We're so afraid of betraying the people that we love, our nearest and dearest, that we essentially begin to betray ourselves. We try to work it away, dance it away, sex it away, travel it away, write it away, and maybe even sometimes self-improve it away, palazza it away. Anything but sit with the reality of what it is and feel it all the way through. And I think that's what this time of just sitting with no projection has been. That upheaval is a necessary upheaval. To feel it, not navigate it, but let yourself realize it. Of course, it's easier said than done when you don't have the tools. You might stop at the discomfort and fight in whatever way you know how to make it go away, and then tell yourself that you're okay. Suppressing it, distracting yourself. These behaviors are essentially a plaster on a gunshot wound. Another thing I have seen is when people say they're processing. Oh, processing. Waiting to find the words. Needing to think. It's such a beautifully termed phrase that has been borrowed from therapy speak to essentially cover the entire gamut of behaviors of actively reaching for a solution that presents itself as a story that you're comfortable with, that gives you a false sense of control in an otherwise completely disorientating experience. The need to show up in our most perfect selves, the running from the vulnerability of what the truth represents. We deny ourselves the opportunity for interrogation when we do this, because what we're not realizing is that we're not sitting with it. We're packaging it into something that makes us feel more in control. And life is not about being in control. Agency and control are not the same thing. there is a thing about truth, integrity, how it does not change, no matter how haphazardly we engage with it, no matter how we might bluster our way through it. Because the truth is the truth. It is not malleable. It will not change. But we can allow ourselves to turn it over, pull it inside out, until we are able to understand it for ourselves. That doesn't require for us to suppress or control anything. It requires for us to give ourselves that permission. Because these realizations, they aren't just thrown at us in order to unsettle us. They're an opportunity to unlock understanding, an understanding about yourself and why you relate the way you relate, so that you can take action to bring your pattern of action into better alignment with your intention. And then what about those people that you relate to? The people whose behavior has shaped yours. I think most of us think it's betraying their love for you when you start to interrogate the way in which they showed up. It's not. If the work you do ends at blaming outwardly, then it's insufficient. In the context of the ancestral, you have asked your ancestors to be born to and with these people. If you're able to trust the truth of what has come to the surface, then you understand that there is no betrayal in continuing to peel back the layers of the realizations and using a modality that underpins integrity and facilitates for this, because then it becomes possible to reach a point of understanding about why that dynamic is what you were born into. And you can begin to discern about how much of what it is that is coming to the surface is your karma that you carried with you into this life, and recognize this moment and these relationships as an opportunity to transmute that karma and experience healing on a soul level. And then the realization has served its purpose. And by trusting the timing of the realization and using the appropriate resources, you begin to see how your life has been gently guiding you to opportunities of self-actualization, literally opening windows into your soul that the movements of the astral bodies illuminate into realizations that you can fully integrate for your own healing and becoming for your most authentic self, beyond the automation of trauma responses that can keep us in survival mode, and the limiting belief of curses beyond our control, and the lies of powerlessness. For us, we use the modality of drum healing, drum meditation, guided journaling, nokuphahla, as guided through clearing into consciousness. We also make safe space for coming together with a community of people who are equally interested in interrogating their past patterns in order to live a life that is more conscious in the present, through our monthly reflection sessions with clearing into consciousness. Ubunyanga has given me the gift of understanding how time and space play into alchemy here in the third dimension. And clearing into consciousness has given me a perspective on the past that nothing else could. It's one thing to hear from another person what is happening and why. It's another thing when you can tie it together through lifetimes, bloodline, and your own personal and ancestral karma. And understand why it is, how it is in this moment. And let it station you as the captain of your own ship. It is a rare and beautiful thing. And I'm so grateful to the community of participants with whom I am able to continue to do this work. I hope that this reflection on the full moon in Pisces gives you perspective about the emotional upheaval that you may be experiencing at this moment, and reveals to you the opportunity that this moment presents. Don't run from it. Just feel it all the way through. Until next time, which will be very soon. Mina Makhosi Nomabutho. This is Sangoma Society, where we demystify the ancestral and the astral. Kukhanya.